The subject today, individuality, mutation, and magic. This is very profound stuff, and because it takes us into something that resonates at the personal level with everyone who's ever met this knowledge. There is a fundamental interest that you have, all of you, in the mystical process. It's part of why you're here, and it's part of why you were open to human design in the first place, and any of the other things that you met beforehand, and all the things you've been through, all of that on a fractal line, your fractal line in this direction. There are some basic laws about the nature of magic and mysticism, and those laws are all caught up in what we call the individual process. But before I go there, in looking at this illustration, the mystical way illustration, there's something to understand about our evolution and our evolutionary process. When we look at the lower part of the mystical way, what we're looking at is pure tribal circuitry. And when we're looking at the upper part of the mystical way, we're looking at pure individual circuitry. There is this binary that is inherent here. As a matter of fact, because the 4037 is not a mystical channel but a bridge, and remember that's very important to understand. The real key to tribal spirituality is only here in the 1949, and last week I discussed with you the dilemmas of that because of the impact that's taking place in terms of the mutation as it affects the 19th gate as we move to 2027 and the changing of the cycle. So there is an imbalance to begin with in this process. That is, it has the illusion that it's balanced, but it's not really. Everything begins here. The whole mystical journey begins with the 19th gate, begins with the pressures of the 19th gate. And those pressures of the 19th gate are not simply about the mystical way, as we well know, but they are about the whole civilization process that humanity has been going through for thousands and thousands of years. In fact, the 19th gate has been the foundation of this round. And this round of about 19,000 years that will come to an end in about 1,300 years. And this pressure driving us in a certain way, and driving us away from the mammalian. And it's one of the first things to recognize about the mystical process. And when you look at the mammalian form, and you see that it's endowed with the potential of the 19th gate, but it doesn't have the 49. That the 49th gate is, in some ways, a kind of miracle gate. And it's deeply, deeply connected to the way in which our awareness has evolved, and ultimately the 49th gate, much more than the 55th gate. Remember, they are both the same codon, they are both histidine. That the 49th gate is deeply connected with the quality of awareness that is going to be evident in raves. You see, the mystical way is first and foremost rising up above the mammalian domain. This is the rising up. Right? This movement, away. Obviously live in Spain. And one of the great traditions of Spain that's both adored and despised is bullfighting. And the bullfight actually represents an example of this rising up. If you go back to ancient Aegean societies, there was a tradition, and that tradition was that you would entertain your tribe with various rites, and one of the rites was known as the bull dance. And in fact, the way in which this worked is that bulls were still considered, all mammals were still considered to carry the spirit of divinity. That is, in fact, the mammals were not lesser in that sense than humans. And it was at a point in the development of that civilization, about 3,000 to 2,500 years ago, where there was this kind of equilibrium between man and beast. And you could see that in the bull dance, because the participants in the dance, these were captives. They were, the selected child of some tribal leader that got defeated in battle, and so forth and so on. And they are given over for this rite of sacrifice as a peace deal, whatever. And these bull dancers were trained. And basically what they were trained to do was run into a ring where there was a wild bull and try to climb onto its back, holding onto its horns, and perform all kinds of, gymnastic whatevers. Most often they were gored to death. And it was quite common that the humans, the bulls, by the way, were never hurt in any way. They were divine in that sense, and this was a divine ritual. And, it was a rare thing for a bull dancer to survive. And when you move ahead in time, and you come to the advent of the bullfight itself, you can see this rising up had already taken place. I mean, the 49th gate is the gate of the butcher. Here, the 19th gate, you've got this territorial gate, and you've got a mammalian gate. The 49th gate takes advantage of that, takes advantage of the food resource that's there. And by the time you rise up to this level, you no longer have a bull dancer that is there to submit to the awesome power of the mammal. You have a matador who, with sheer bravado, stands alone, on its feet in front of the bull and kills it. And, and cuts off its ears and stuff like that. That's the rising up. And now that may be a gory, unpleasant example for some, but nonetheless, that is really what it's all about. The first thing about the mystical way is to rise up above the mammal. And of course, in order for us to rise above the mammal, we have to have something that the mammal doesn't have. And obviously we do. That is, if you look at mammalian design, there's no heterajna and there's no emotional system. I mean, no emotional system and no ego system. And when you speak of the emotions, obviously you're speaking of a very powerful wave and a very powerful potential awareness system. And it's interesting the way in which mammals connect to us is that, they're endowed with the 62nd gate. They can connect to the 17 in humans. So these are the mammals that can be taught tricks, for example. This is the logical, organizing capacity. Mammals have the potential of the 12th gate, but not the 22nd. So, this is where humankind can befriend animals. They, create that particular unusual social dimension that humans have with different forms, particularly mammalian forms like, dogs and cats and horses and things like that. And then finally you have the 49, and the 49 is a very different relationship. It's a very different relationship. This is where the mammal becomes subservient to the human. And this is where they have an essential bargain, and the essential bargain is that the human protects the mammal in the sense that, it protects it from predators, and it provides it with the essential food that it needs. But of course it occasionally takes its young, and the sacrifice is made. And all themes of sacrifice, and as we go through this process of looking at the mystical way, we will talk about the theme of sacrifice because it is fundamental to the most primitive of our world religions. That is, sacrifice is at the bedrock of, the Judeo-Christian Islamic thematic. It begins with Abraham, and it begins with the willingness of Abraham, to sacrifice his son on the command of God. This is the 49th gate. This is Moses and the sacrifice of the eldest children of all of the Egyptians. This is Jesus, who is the son that is sacrificed. It goes on and on and on. In other words, this theme of sacrifice is the first level above the mammalian. And so all mystical processes begin in this, with this pressure that we are here to rise up above the mammalian world, and in doing so, we turn the mammalian world into a lesser form. And in that way, we are able, and again, I'm talking about not self-consciousness, we are able to see ourselves as something special and something that is somehow endowed specially by the great forces, wherever those great forces happen to be. The dilemma of the 49th gate is that, first of all, this is this is an emotional wave, and it is a ratchet wave. And again, and this will lead us to interesting discussions about the cranking up of spiritual energy. Whether it is whirling dervishes, which can be an extreme, whether it was the first horse worshippers who would get under horse blankets and run around like mad until they built themselves up into some kind of an incredible state, whether it is the Southern Baptist preacher in the United States cranking up his crowd with, a cadence that is overwhelming, whether it is the Jesuit priest haunting the consciousness of his young students with the horrors of the potential of hell. All of this is part of this ratcheting up of the fever of spirituality. And all of this is to rise up above the mammal. Now, from our perspective, that doesn't seem like something that is particularly exciting. As a matter of fact, we have come to a place where we recognize, at least for example within the context of human design, we recognize the intrinsic holiness in that sense of all forms of life, because we all share the same personality crystal mechanics. And whether one is a mammal or a rose, that at the personality level, at the crystal level, we are all from the same seed, all of us. We are only differentiated by design, and only by design. As I remind my dog when I'm annoyed with its lack of a neocortex, that there but for the grace of God go I. It is all question of the design. And yet to see that when we're looking at the mystical way, this is not about simply interpreting it as a neo-matrix for now, and to see it as a platform for the evolutionary process of our mystical, spiritual, religious life. This rising up above the mammal remains today the bedrock of just about all the rituals that we have. When you think about the feasts associated with religious festivals, all of this is supported by our dominance over the food chain, and how important it is for us to, at the tribal level, to be able to, roast that goat and cook that pig, and whatever the case may be, as part of our festivals. And it is one of the things about the tribal process is that, the tribal process gets locked into what is a self-supporting mechanism in which there is no way out, because there is no mutation. There isn't.